Hello and welcome to Good News Africa. So this is basically where I look at the top issues of the day in Kenya, Africa, and around the world. So for now, I'm looking: is ODM realistic in demanding for the deputy president position? Is ODM realistic in demanding for the deputy president position? Of course, ODM has been in the opposition since 2005 and says it no longer wants to be in the opposition, and that is why it is seeking a merger with UDA. But then, of course, you have a UDA, especially Mount Kenya region, warning ODM that the deputy president position is not up for grabs. So basically, that means that then ODM has so the only realistic position it can get is that of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, PMS, PCS, occupied by Musalia Mudavadi. You see, even Musalia Mudavadi had to be given a docket foreign affairs to at least make him engage. Otherwise, it is not. That work is the work of the deputy president. Of course, you have during the Uhuru Kenyatta regime, he gave that work to Matiang'i, and of course, Ruto insider. So that was an abuse on William Ruto because that is the aspect of coordinating government should be the work of the deputy president. But then, of course, it is going to be a tight battle between Mount Kenya and ODM on who will get the deputy president position. For now, ODM appears that it is in a weaker position. For remember, Ruto wants a weakened ODM. He wants to take over the Raila Odinga voting bloc. Of course, that is Coast Western, Nyanza, Coast and Western, and of course. You have the UDA Secretary General Hassan Omar saying there will be nothing like zoning. Of course, ODM has said cost is its area and so has advised UDA not to field candidates in the ODM strongholds. So much is this so that they have suspended talks between UDA and ODM have been suspended because of this quarrel over zoning. So basically now ODM says that the UDA should not field candidates in its area. So, what do you think about the ODM UDA merger talks? Do you think it is going to bring the deputy president position is going to go to ODM? Remember, yes, Ruto has lost the Mount Kenya votes. That's not in question. But then, to what extent has Ruto lost the Mount Kenya votes? To what extent? So, basically, Ruto knows he still has some votes in Mount Kenya, so he will not be he will not take such a huge risk uh, to uh, to to dismiss his support in Mount Kenya. He will not take such a huge risk. Of course, Moi ruled without Mount Kenya votes, but then remember, during Moi's time, the opposition was disunited, it was disjointed, and so every other region fielded a presidential candidate. But then, of course, now the opposition knows the way to beat an incumbent president is to be united and field one candidate, and maybe that is why then this is why then you have this is why you have the United Opposition, I think, likely we select Kalonzo Musyoka as the flag bearer as the United Opposition. Of course, Kalonzo Musyoka, I think he is a safe pair of hands. I think he is agreeable. I think he has been in politics for the past 40 years and, of course, does not rub shoulders the wrong way. So I think Kalonzo will be the United Opposition flag bearer. Of course, the host of Econini podcast, Mwafrika says, I think his studios were raided just recently. So, the host of Econini podcast, Mwafrika says that Mwafrika says that ODM, that is, we don't need to import an angel. We can't take someone who has been in the system, such as Kalonzo Musyoka, and then hope the power of institutions will act as a restart. Remember, Botswana, big man, Botswana, former President Festus Mugabe said that Africa does not need a big a strong man, it needs a strong institution. So, of course, Kalonzo Musyoka, I think, will be the opposition flag bearer. Of course, there will be others contending for that positions such as Fred Matiang'i, of course, and Gachagua, of course, has been impeached and so will not be vying as a presidential candidate. But I think Gachagua is going to be the kingmaker. He really is going to be the one to decide who he will throw his support behind. But of course, Gachagua has about half of the Mount Kenya. Also, of course, DCP is going the majority Kiko countries are about 10, so that's a significant number. We will have 10 majority Kiko counties, so basically that's a head start for anyone that is going to seek the presidency. That is how the likes of Huru Kenyatta and Mwai Kibaki were able to beat Raila Odinga. Of course, Raila Odinga said he had never lost an election. The only election he lost was the 1997 election. Of course, going by that, then of course, Raila said he was, but of course, the 2007 election was clearly a stolen victory from Raila Odinga. So, of course, according to the host of Econini podcast, Mofika, he says that basically we should not be importing an angel to be the opposition flag bearer. We can take someone that has been in the system and then the power of institutions will restrain them. So that is it. And now ODM, as it goes for the negotiations, what can it get the deputy president a position? That is something that we need to be looking at. But I think for now, Ruto wants to is courting all regions but then, of course, it will be the ultimate test of this union between ODM and UDA will be in who will be the running mate of President William Ruto. Will he stick with Kizure Kindiki? Remember, uh, when they were going to select a running mate in 2022, UDA basically the Kindiki was liked by the inner sanctum of Ruto. Of course, he was favored, but then, of course, and Gachagua came around and said, "Do you have the campaign money? Does Kindiki have the campaign money that I have?" So basically, then Ruto made a political decision saying maybe he needs to select a Kiko, since remember, there's always the fear that if he selects an Kiko, of course, they're all Mount Kenya, but then, of course, the Tharaka are a lesser known group. It is the Kiko that forms the largest segment of the Mount Kenya vote. So basically, you have the Kikuyu forming the largest segment of the Mount Kenya vote. And so for William Ruto, he chose Rigathi Gachagua instead of William Ruto. That is what William Ruto selected. He selected Gachagua, but Ruto insiders had chosen Kithure Kindiki. So now Kithure Kindiki and he delivered the Mount Kenya votes to William Ruto away from Rigathi Gachagua. But I think Kikus are very much these are very much even-handed. So basically, they will support Gachagua. I think at the last minute we will see a lot of defections from the side of Ruto, and so basically Gachagua will be more emboldened. Gachagua will really be the kingmaker of this coalition. So basically now ODM, what does it bring to the table? Could it be Gladys Wanga? Could it be Ali Hassan Joho? Could it be maybe who's the other one? Maybe Wycliffe Oparanya. So basically that is the question that needs to be asked. I think it could be some, if it is not from Mount Kenya, it could be from Luo Nyanza. But remember, the voting turnout of Luo Nyanza cannot be compared to Mount Kenya. That's what you need to know. The voting turnout of Luo Nyanza cannot be compared to Mount Kenya. Basically, even for Raila, as he was their man, the voting turnout was below 70%, while for Mount Kenya, it was in the region of 80%. So basically, Luos don't come out to vote in large numbers. And that's why Raila lost the election, because his backyards, the voting turnout was notoriously low. So that is how then Raila kept on losing elections. Of course, in other words, he was also rigged out. But then, of course, if there was a near 100% turnout in the vote sheet of Raila Odinga, then you will have him securing the presidency very, very easily. So basically, now you have the Tikos going against the Luo. So basically, that is going to be Ruto is going to have to decide who will be the formidable running mate. Basically, you don't look at the qualities of the running mate, you look at how many votes they can bring to the table. So basically, for Gladys Wanga, she could bring in low votes, but remember the turnout will be low. There is not that enthusiasm for Ruto as there was for Raila. But then if he chooses Mount Kenya, then that means the other regions could go to the United Opposition. So this is damned if you do, damned if you don't moment for William Ruto. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. So basically, that will be the position for William Ruto. But I think Ruto needs to, I think ODM needs to, I think it will have stayed put in the opposition. It could have bargained better so that they form a post-election coalition. I think this election could go to the second round. This could be the first election to go to the next round. Of course, the opposition is saying they must make sure that Ruto is a one-term president. That's what the opposition is saying. They must make Ruto be a one-term president. So they say that President William Ruto, and it is very hard. Kenya has never had a one-term president. That's what Ruto insiders say, that Kenya has never had a one-term president. That basically uh, and Ruto will not be the first one-term president. Of course, that is a very loaded statement. That could imply we will use all means necessary, use the instruments of state, the instruments of government, maybe even rig the election to make sure that Ruto does not become a one-term president. But there have been one-term presidents in Africa. According to Martha Karua, she says that Kenya needs a series of one-term presidents. That's what Martha Karua says. She says that Kenya needs a series of one-term presidents who will then, so that presidents take their job seriously. That's what Martha Karua says, that Kenya needs a series of one-term presidents if they are going to take their job seriously. So basically, that means, but there have been one-term presidents in Africa. It's very hard to beat the incumbent president in Africa. Remember, they control the courts, they control the police, they control the army, and most importantly, they appoint the electoral referee. So basically, the IBC chair is appointed by the president. Of course, there are two candidates that were presented to William Ruto. There was Charles Nyachai from Kisi and Etung and Ezekon from Turkana. So of course, William Ruto chose Ezekon from Turkana, and so basically he is an insider of Joseph Nanok, who was Joshua Nanok, who was the Turkana governor, and then Tur Ezekon was the Attorney General of Turkana. So basically, now he is the State House Comptroller. So basically, Ruto maybe sees him as an ally. So basically, do you think ODM will seek it out in having the deputy president position? So bye for now. It is the next episode. Bye for now.